Okay, well, we are going to go ahead and get started to this evening. I want to welcome everybody to Wilderness Wednesday and ask if you have your microphone on, that you just put it to mute, and let us get started. We are so excited that this evening we have Jo Fessett with us, and she's with the Audubon Society, and we figured out she's been there for 16 years, so we're excited to have her. And I think that eagles is a really popular topic because we've got a nice number of 23 that have registered tonight. So they might still be popping on. I am recording this and it will go up on our YouTube site. And I think that's the only housekeeping things I have. So I will turn off my video. We've been out at Kids Day at the farm today, entertaining all the fourth graders in Kankakee County, and I'm kind of done with that for the day. So we go back again tomorrow morning at 9 a.m. and do it another day.
Oh my gosh, Holly, I'm shocked you can still put a couple words together into a sentence.
I know. But today the weather was gorgeous, so hopefully we'll hold out for tomorrow. So without further, I'm so excited that we have Jo with us, and we'll have our presentation like we do, and then we'll have a few minutes at the end for questions and anything else that you want to ask her before she has to run. So without any further, I will turn it out to Jo, and I will get out of her way.
Okay, well, I'm just going to say a quick hello to everybody, show you my face so you can see who's talking. And yeah, I'm very excited to be here. I am a lifelong birder. I love talking about birds. I'm very lucky that that interest actually landed me in the job I'm in. And I am going to shut off my video and I'm going to share my screen. And we're going to do what everybody came to do, is talk a little bit about eagles. Okay. If I can get this going. Now, Holly, you know I had it going. There we go. Okay. I'm working on a different laptop here, so my buttons weren't working the same. So yes, I'm delighted to be here. My name is Jo Fessett. I am the executive director of Illinois Audubon Society. I've been doing that for only not even quite a year. Previous to that, I was the assistant to the executive director. So when our current past executive director announced his retirement, I thought it was probably time to stop training new directors and just step in and do the job. And I have to admit, I am just having an absolute blast. I can tell from the way Holly talks about her job that, you know, what's the old saying, that if you enjoy your work, you never have a job. You're always just enjoying what you're doing. We are located in Springfield, Illinois. That's where our headquarters are. We're about maybe a mile and a half west of I-55 on Clear Lake Avenue. So if you're ever coming through, please stop by and see us. So when Holly sent me the announcement and the invitation, she actually gave my talk a title, and it was called Save the Eagles. And I'm going to change that to We Saved the Eagles, because what we're going to talk about here tonight it's just an absolute conservation success story that has happened in our lifetime, and it's got a great ending. And here we are. This is what we're here to talk about tonight. This beautiful, beautiful bird. As I was just telling everybody, I believe that within the Illinois Audubon Society, that our members are most excited and probably send us the most pictures of either eagles or hummingbirds. So they range from one of our largest birds to one of our tiniest birds. And they're both just so exciting and charismatic. But here's your typical view of a bald eagle. When we think of a bald eagle, the dark body and that beautiful white head and fierce eyes and absolute ferocious looking beak. Bald comes from an English term. I believe it's spelled B-A-U-L-D, which means white. So unlike when we think of bald as having no hair and no feathers, this guy certainly doesn't fit that description at all. And I shouldn't say guy because we don't know really if it's a guy or a girl, because as with most raptors, the males and females look exactly alike. The only way you can tell the difference is when they're side by side, because the females tend to be a little bit larger. They have a little bit heavier weight to pull. They carry those eggs, and they probably tend to forage a little bit less when they're incubating the eggs and taking care of the young. So they need to start out a little bit bigger so they can sustain that. So let's start out a little bit about Illinois Audubon Society. If you don't know who we are, we were founded in 1897, so we are just finishing up our 125th year. We are the oldest nonprofit conservation organization in Illinois. And there's been a lot of flutter of items on the news today. If you haven't seen it yet, regarding National Audubon Society. We are not part of National. We are not affiliated with National. We're actually older than National. There are still about a dozen or so states that are independent. So I like to say that we are in Illinois for Illinois. National is certainly a partner of ours, and we appreciate the work they do, but we are not connected with them at all. And that's our mission statement there, to promote the perpetuation and appreciation of native flora and fauna of Illinois and the habitats that support them. So it would only serve that an organization this old, their mission statement is a little archaic sounding, but basically it boils down to we want to teach people about nature, about the cycle of life. We want to get them out in nature to appreciate it, because until you appreciate something, you don't have the desire to learn more about it. And once you learn more about it, you want to take care of it. So our mission is to protect the plants and animals in Illinois. And one of the best ways to do this is by protecting the habitat that it needs to survive. And of course, if we're protecting habitats for all our wonderful birds and animals, we're also protecting our lands and water for ourselves. So rising tide lifts all boats. So we do put our money where our mouth is. We have protected since, maybe the early 90s. We've protected more than 6,000 acres in the state of Illinois, with an investment of $13 million. We are a membership-based organization. We've got about 2021. It fluctuates here or there, statewide members, and we have 17 chapters throughout the state. Now, there in Kankakee, you do have a Kankakee Audubon Society. That is a chapter of National. There's also about 12 chapters of National. It gets very confusing. It's clear to us, but it's confusing to those of you that are trying to join a chapter. Now, we still don't own 6,000 acres. We own maybe about half of that. Is one of the things we do. Being a nonprofit, we can purchase land a lot faster and a lot quicker than our partners, being Department of Natural Resources or the Forest Service or municipalities, who often have to get the money in their budget and plan for it. So if a piece of land comes up for sale that one of our partners is especially interested in, we do this a lot with the Department of Natural Resources. They will call us and they'll say, there's a particular piece of land for sale that we've had our eyes on for a long time. Illinois Audubon, if you buy this land, we'll buy it back from you. And that's sometimes how the story goes, if we're lucky. We always buy for fair market value. Every piece of property is appraised. We do not mess with land values. We do not undersell or oversell. And so right now we have about 3,000 acres. We have 5 major sanctuaries. And when I say major, those have parking lots and trails. Some of them even have indoor facilities. So our goal is not to amass the most acres. Our goal is to keep saving acres and take care of what we can take care of right now, because some of our lands were donated to us. And even though the land comes to you at no cost, there's a huge cost to maintaining land, the overhead of restoration and just keeping it. So we're very mindful of that. So, but most of our members belong because they love birds and they love to bird watch. And bird watchers are very important. This will play into some of the story I'm about to tell you guys here tonight. Birds are great indicators. As we all know, everything's connected. And when you tug on the string of one thing, you're going to tug on the string of several others. So when numbers of birds start to drop, or even if they start to go up, something's going on in the habitat. Something is causing that to happen. And the birders are out there watching, and they're noticing, and they're logging into applications like eBird, which, if some of you are familiar with that, or some of you are familiar with like iNaturalist, where you're out there reporting what you're seeing. And there's a whole bunch of researchers and scientists in the background there that are taking that data, and they're looking for trends and looking for what's going on to see what's being affected. So this whole thing started a long time ago with this lady here, Harriet Hemingway. She was from Boston. She was a bird watcher. She was interested in birds. And this was about the mid 1890s. And she was becoming alarmed because the numbers of herons and egrets were dropping because of the feather trade. People were using feathers to adorn their hats. They were using them in house decorations, in a vase in the doorway, decorating frames. These birds were being slaughtered for nothing more than just their pretty feathers. So her and her friends started a campaign to make this illegal, to stop the harvest of these birds for their feathers. And they would walk up and down the streets of Boston, and then they would go into stores, and they would report people that were violating these laws that they had gotten passed. And they started Massachusetts Audubon. And while they were fighting this, they reached out to a couple other states, one of them being New York and Illinois, mainly Chicago. Chicago was obviously one of the larger populations, and we had the Chicago Academy of Sciences and a lot of bird watchers there and ornithologists interested in birds. So she reached out and said, would you help us with this campaign? So we formed Illinois Audubon in 1897 and helped them stop this slaughter of the birds, and which eventually kept right on rolling into the Migratory Bird Treaty Act of 1918 to protect migratory birds. You could not kill them or possess them, certainly not take them for their feathers. Once the act was passed, the next order was to educate people on this law. It wasn't enough to pass the legislation. They had to get the word out that we had to protect birds. So in fact, one of the ways they did that was to reach into the classroom. So the early days of Audubon, a lot of our members were classrooms and teachers and students. And today we still encourage the younger birders, but it's mostly adults. So let's go back and talk a little bit about the eagle. So we became our nation symbol in 1782, and I don't know if many of you have heard the story of how Benjamin Franklin was not happy. Although eagles are mainly fish eaters, they also feed on carrion. They have no problem swooping down on a dead carcass, chasing everything else off, and feasting on a good meal. And he felt that this was a lazy way of getting fed. And while he did not officially state this, it's rumored that in a letter to his daughter in 1784 that he was expressing his dismay that the eagle had been chosen because he felt it was a bird of bad moral character. So back when it became our nation symbol, they estimate there was about 100,000 eagles in our lower 48. And enter the bird watchers once again. So that was about 100 years later, in the mid 1800s, the bird watchers started sending out the alarm. So they noticed the populations of the eagle was dropping. And some of that was due to just people were shooting them, their habitats were being destroyed. And they set out the alarm that they were seeing less eagles. And it wasn't until, again, almost 100 years later in 1940 that the Bald and Golden Eagle Protection Act was passed, which made it illegal to shoot eagles, to destroy their habitat, to destroy their nests. And I love this. This poster is actually from the 1970s, where it shows there's a $500 reward for information leading to the arrest and conviction of anyone killing an American bald eagle in the state of Illinois. So even then, even with the law being passed, we still had people that were shooting eagles. $500 today would be about $2,500 if anybody wants to test that law. So remember, we went from 100,000 eagles to the worry that eagles were dropping. And in 1962, Rachel Carson published The Silent Spring, which really let out the alarm for the chemicals in our habitats and in our systems that were harming the animals. And at that point, they estimated that the eagle population had dropped. The eagles had dropped to 800. They counted about 400 active nests. So they were assuming there was about 400 eagles related to that. So what they were seeing, not only were the eagle numbers dropping, but more importantly, it was the numbers of juveniles were dropping. So while we still had adults that were nesting, they weren't producing juveniles. And what they were finding out that the DDT was getting into the water. And since one of their main food sources is fish, the fish were becoming contaminated. And when the eagles would eat the fish, it wasn't killing the adults, but it was interfering with their calcium production. So the eggs were soft and the juveniles were not. The eggs were being crushed, the juveniles were not surviving. So therefore, when they found out that the juveniles were not surviving, they knew something was going on. So it was because of Rachel Carson and her alarm against DDT that finally got them to ban it in 1972. So let's go back and look at this decline. So in 1782, we have so many eagles, they're created as our symbol. About 100 years later, they started noticing the decline. Another 100 years passes and they pass the Eagle Protection Act because the numbers have dropped so far. 1962, Silent Spring starts to explain it all. And again, it's not till almost 10 years after that they finally banned DDT. Shortly after that, in 1978, the eagle was placed on the endangered species list. That is a federal listing. And when that happens, unfortunately, it takes the numbers to drop so low for it to go on a list which allows a lot of money to be accessed for this problem. So the federal dollars were available for captive breeding and reintroduction, habitat protection organizations such as Illinois Audubon Society, the Nature Conservancy, the Isaac Walton League started raising money and looking for suitable habitats that could be protected where there may be eagles already nesting or were good sites for eagle nesting. So they started protecting the habitat so the eagles, once their numbers started rebounding, they would have protected places to nest and reproduce. So that's the bad story. So let's look at the uptick. So here we are, 2007, 35 years after they're placed on the endangered species list. They were delisted because the numbers were bouncing back. 9,800 pairs, almost 20,000 eagles. 2 years later, they counted 72,000 eagles in the lower 48. And today in 2023, here we are in Illinois alone, they estimate around 200 nests and 3,100 eagles. So as I said, this is a conservation success story that we've seen play out certainly in a lot of our lifetimes. So seeing eagles today is a lot more common. Those of you in Kankakee, you have a large, you've got the Kankakee River there. I'm sure many of you see eagles a lot more frequently than we did even 20 or 30 years ago. And that's a gorgeous picture of what has rebounded. And again, there he is with one of his favorite food sources, fish. So back in, I would say 20 years ago, when I first moved to Central Illinois, still seeing eagles was still an exciting event. And of course, the best way to see eagles back then was in the wintertime along the rivers in these wintry landscapes where they would come to Illinois. Illinois is known as one of the largest populations of migrating bald eagles in the wintertime. And why is that? We've got the Mississippi and we've got the Illinois River, and they're fish eaters. And in the wintertime, our two rivers have lock and dam systems which keep the waterways open. So for a long time, the best way to see eagles was to go to one of the lock and dam systems, and they would be perched like that scene I just showed you in the tree, congregating, watching the open waters, loafing around, swooping down, catching fish every once in a while. But today, that's not the story. People call and they ask me, how can I see a bald eagle? And most of the time I just tell them, just look up. I mean, I often see them in Sangamon County because of the Sangamon River. You go anywhere near a river or a lake these days, and you're bound to see them flying somewhere. I see them all year now because they're crossing over from one part of the Sangamon to the other. So seeing eagles is getting easier. The hard part, or the more difficult part, is being able to identify them so that when you see an eagle, you know what it is. Obviously, you look up and you see a big, large black bird. It could be an eagle. However, also could be one of these guys. They're black, they're almost as big, and we see them quite often as well. However, the one thing you have to remember with eagles, when you're trying to look up and figure out, is that an eagle or is that even a red-tailed, which often looks really big, or is it a turkey vulture? You have to remember that eagles have a very, very flat profile. They almost like a sheet of plywood when they're flying. Whereas turkey vultures, more often they have this, they fly with this V shape. Think of turkey vulture, think of V for vulture, and that'll help you remember it. It's called dihedral, and they sway back and forth on the thermals, but they will always have a V shape to them. So here's another good comparison. We're used to seeing red-tailed hawks. Red-tailed hawks are everywhere, so you're kind of used to remembering what size they are. Some of you probably on the Kankakee are even lucky enough to see osprey, which are a little bit bigger. And then there's our turkey vulture, which actually has a lot of white underneath the wing. Sometimes that's not readily visible. So what you're seeing is a big black bird in the sky that's very large. And as you can see next to the eagle, not much smaller. However, that eagle does have that white head and that white tail. So if you're able to see it in the right light, you will be able to see that. A little bit bigger than that is the golden eagle, which does come through Illinois. It will migrate through Illinois. You will very rarely see them. They're also a very large bird. As you can see, it's almost as big as our eagle. And of course, we got the big guy on the end, the California condor, and you've got to go west to see him. But the way the birds are acting crazy these days, who knows? Someday we may have a report of one, but it's highly unlikely. So if you look up in the sky and you see a big black bird, it's a turkey vulture, or it could be an eagle. And if you look at the golden eagle, pretty much the difference between that and the bald eagle is that it doesn't have the white head. So sometimes we have people looking up and they're seeing these big brown birds and they think it's an eagle. However, it takes an eagle 5 years to get that bright white head. So if you see an eagle around 1.5 years old, there you go. Kind of looks like a golden eagle. Probably is not if you're in Illinois. And the other indicator is habitat. Golden eagles are not fish eaters. They don't hang around the rivers and lakes like our bald eagles do. But oftentimes people will see this big brown bird and they'll even question what it is completely, let alone an eagle. But you'll see the juveniles. And if you see the juvenile, their beaks are even dark like a golden eagle is. So it takes them 5 years to get that bright white head and that gorgeous beak. And it takes them there to look at this. So again, I'm going to guess that the eagle on the bottom perhaps is the female. And this is a pair, an adult pair, and they are nesting right now. So if you're lucky enough to know where a nest is, you can probably see them sitting there, getting ready to hatch those babies. So again, if you're interested in birds, maybe some of you do have an eBird account. Maybe some of you use iNaturalist. I encourage you to use both or one or the other, whatever you're comfortable with. But eBird is a way to report what you're seeing. It'll keep a list. It'll keep your life list. Some birders are lifers and they like to grow that list, and some birders just like to keep track of what they've been seeing. And you can sometimes go back and say, you know, gosh, when did I see that snowbird first last year? When did the cardinals show first last year? And again, all of that information is fed to researchers at Cornell Lab of Ornithology, and they keep a watch on trends. So the eagle is a success story. Is it completely out of their problems? No. They're still being watched. Some of their threats today are electrocution is a big one. They're big birds. So more often than not, if they land on a pole, a power pole, they have a greater chance of connecting and being electrocuted than the smaller birds do. Survival rate, of course, is tough. It's about a 50% survival rate. If they don't leave the nest and start hunting and get good at it, they can starve. And the other problem that we're noticing, we're cropping up in eagles and a lot of our birds, is lead poisoning. They're carrion eaters. So when hunters, the deer hunters, are dressing in the fields and they're leaving entrails behind, if that has shot in it, the eagles will ingest the shot. And we're seeing growing numbers of eagles suffering from lead contamination, which is a pitiful sight to see an eagle that's been afflicted with that. So it's not like they're in the clear and people are just ignoring them. They're still watching them and making sure that they're out there, but their numbers are growing. And if you get to see eagles, it's a lot of fun. So think about eBird, get out there and bird, and whatever you're doing, please take a kid with you. It's so important to get our younger generation to appreciate what we appreciate. They are our stewards of the future. They're going to be taking care of what we appreciate now and the habitats we need. And with that, I am done. And I'm ready to take comments, questions, whatever you want to shoot at me. And Holly, thanks for inviting me. I always love to talk about any bird. Nobody has any trivia questions?
Yeah, this is your opportunity to ask questions about, well, the eagles, but if you have other Illinois birding questions, Joe probably knows the answer to those too.
Well, I'll throw you guys out a trivia question. How many feathers does an eagle have? Anybody want to take a guess?
Oh,
No prize, but I'll take a guess. Everybody's counting their eagle picture, the feathers.
no, what was it, 6,000? I don't remember. I used to know this.
You're close, you're close. It's actually 7,200.
Okay.
And the only reason this number sticks in my head is when I was working in Havana, I kind of skipped over a little bit of my history. I am actually born and raised in Lamont, and around 1999, I found myself in Central Illinois, and I spent a couple years working for the Nature Conservancy on the river in Havana on the Illinois River Project. And just as the eagle numbers were starting to increase, and we had a third grade class come down. Holly, you'll appreciate this. We had a teacher bring a third grade class down, and we went and looked at the eagles, and the kids came back and they had been working on an eagle unit. And the teacher said, now everybody, you can ask, you can ask Joe any question you want to ask her about eagles. And the first one was, how many feathers does an eagle have? And I didn't know the answer. So when the session was done, I went to the teacher and I said, next year, maybe we'll have a list of questions first. But I immediately said, I don't know, but I'll look it up. So
I've had that too, where I'm like, oh geez, if I had 5 minutes of warning, I could have done better.
yeah. So I forevermore, I do remember that an eagle has about 7,200 feathers, give or take, unless it's molting or not. Does anybody have any bird questions? Migration is coming. Birds are starting to move. Cardinals are getting brighter and they're starting to sing. My snowbirds are still here, but they're starting to chase each other. So that only means one thing: spring is coming.
Well, the eagles, we see them more in the winter, typically here along the river, because first of all, there's no leaves on the trees, so you can see them better,
Right.
But once it becomes nesting season and they begin to lay their eggs, one of them is almost always at or very, very close to the nest.
Yes.
And so they don't travel as far.
Right.
And they have maybe a 12-mile range or so so they don't go maybe 6 miles in each direction away from their nest, 5-6 miles away from their nest. So you don't see them quite as much, especially right now. If you want to know, if you know where a nest is, a good time to really see them is after you know that they have hatched, because now, especially as the babies get bigger, Mama and Papa are bringing in rabbits, they're bringing in squirrels, they're bringing in ducks, they're bringing in fish. They're feeding them constantly. Those babies grow so fast. If you ever see a baby juvenile as they get bigger, their crops are so full. So that's a really good time to see them if you know where a nest is, because Mama and Papa are coming in so much that you're able to see them much more often than right now. Right now you're not going to see them quite as much because they are sitting on their nest, one or the other at all times.
Yeah, the wintertime is easier because there's no, there's no foliage, but we do get a lot of migrating eagles down here. So the numbers just jump. And I seeing any eagle is exciting. Seeing 80 of them in a tree is spectacular. But and with our climate is changing, so they're still coming here because it's most likely our water will be open. But if the waters aren't freezing, they're ranging out. So just because they're not congregating by the rivers doesn't mean that they're ranging out further into the fields anyway. So their numbers still climb here in Illinois. It's just that they're going out further and more people are seeing them.
And we're getting so many more. Like I said, I know where 18 nests are within an hour and a half of my house. I mean, it's just crazy how many they are. And I guarantee you, I don't know where all of them are. So I'm sure there's a lot more.
Yes, yes, they are.
I mean, they're so nice to see them and see them coming, coming back in the numbers that they have been. It's just amazing. When I first moved out here about 18 years ago, a couple years later, a year later or so, I saw 2 eagles on the island across from me. I assumed, because I knew nothing about them at the time, that one was a male and one was a female. One was dark, one was white. I had a white head. I didn't know.
Yeah.
And then I learned, and that's what I like about one of the many things I like about wildlife photography is I have learned so much. Eventually I found out that was a juvenile, or not a juvenile, an immature, I guess. And so that was pretty interesting to learn that, that they take 5 years to really get their color that we see, when we think of an eagle.
Well, Holly, it's been great. Thank you so much for inviting me.
We have one that was in the chat, and I'm sorry, and then we will part ways. Are wind turbines causing deaths? And if so, what is being done?
Yeah, the wind turbines are, yeah, that's another issue. We could probably spend a whole night talking about that. Are they causing death? It's our hope that they are placing wind turbines out of migration routes. They do go through a large permitting process, and of course, we're not going to prevent 100%. But we trust the process that they're not placing them in the routes that we know. Again, the trends of people are reporting birds and where they're at. They pretty much know where the migration routes are. There's a large controversy going on right now because they want to put wind turbines out in Lake Michigan. And unfortunately, Lake Michigan is a huge migratory route for neotropicals and raptors. So that's being played out right now. That's about all I can say on wind turbines. All I can say, there's no silver bullet for our energy crisis. All we can do is to just, all of us personally, just try and consume less energy. And until we can do that, all the fabulous sustainable energy in the world is not going to be perfect.
Thank you, Joe, so much for joining us this evening. And like I said, this hopefully will be taped and we will be able to have it on our YouTube channel. And I'll let you all know when that is, up and running. Otherwise, thank you again, Joe, for joining us. And if any of you come up with questions later that you have forgotten or thought about later, let me know and I'll just compile them all and send them on to Joe. Otherwise, next week, we're going to be having another Wilderness Wednesday, 6 p.m. It is the last, no, we have 2 left. And then the following week is Dwayne Friend talking about weather and natural disasters with weather. So please, if you haven't signed up for the last 2 weeks in our series, please do so. And if you have any questions about the presentation Joe did or about our upcoming Wilderness Wednesdays, please let me know. But thank you so much for joining us this evening.
Good night, everybody.
University of Illinois Extension.